Ukrainian army is using US-supplied ATOM anti-personnel landmines to counter Russian infantry, open-source intelligence, OSINT, reported on Tuesday. According to the report by OSINT military bloggers, ATOM landmines or area denial artillery munitions have been spotted being used by the 24th Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine's armed forces. Being an anti-personnel landmine and delivered via 155mm artillery shells, ATOM is designed to create instant minefields ahead of enemy movements. Each artillery round is capable of deploying 36 ATOM mines, designed to self-destruct after a predetermined time to minimize risks to civilians. Each round of carriers can deliver minefields to a range of around 17.6 kilometers. The anti-personnel landmine is believed to be especially effective in countering Russia's meat attacks. An M731 shell in the lineup is equipped with M67 and M72 mines. Another proof that the US-supplied landmines are being used by Ukrainian troops was a social media image showing APL on the ground next to a Russian military bomb. Anti-personnel landmines have been provided to Kyiv as part of U.S. military aid package worth $275 million unveiled in November under a Presidential Drawdown Authority (ADP), Ukrainian media reported. Also included in U.S. defense package are Modular Pack Mine System, M131 MOPMS, and the Volcano system that are expected to bolster Ukraine's defenses in the war with Russia. It's worth mentioning that the United States has supplied Ukraine with $65.9 billion in military assistance since Russia's full-fledged invasion of the country in February 2022.
Across Europe, there are signs that the continent is preparing for the unthinkable, NBC News reports. In particular, Lithuania is preparing to mine bridges that lead to the Russian Federation. Also in the neighboring Baltic Sea, NATO ships are hunting for the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation, which is accused of cutting underwater communication cables. In addition, they want to build a large anti-missile defense system in the skies over Europe, which will be similar to Israel's Iron Dome. European governments and citizens are worried that an emboldened Kremlin could deploy its army after Ukraine. There is also widespread nervousness that the new US isolationist president has suggested he might fail to protect America's historic NATO allies if they are attacked by Russia, the article notes. Despite recently criticizing Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, US President Donald Trump has shown few signs that his stance has changed significantly. In an interview with Fox News, he noted that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is fighting with a much greater force and that he shouldn't have done that because we could have made a deal. He said little about NATO and Europe, but repeated his demand that European partners spend 5% of their GDP on defense, twice what NATO recommends. He also complained that the United States spent more on Ukraine's defense than Brussels. NATO should pay more. It's funny because it affects them much more. There's an ocean between us, he said. In turn, European officials have repeatedly said that Putin is preparing for a war with the West. In particular, for many, this is already happening since officials accuse Moscow of hybrid war attacks, from meddling in elections to attempts to shoot down airliners with incendiary bombs. The Europeans take this very seriously, said retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the former commander of US Army Europe from 2014 to late 2017. According to him, the Eastern European countries that are closer to the Russian border know that this is real because they live there. However, those people who live in Western Europe or the United States, that is, far from the aggressor country, say, come on, this will not happen. Europe must be prepared for the most extreme military contingencies. Put simply, to prevent war, we must spend more. If we wait longer, it will cost us more, an EU official wrote in an email to NBC News when asked whether the continent was preparing for a worst-case scenario of war with Russia. The publication noted that the Baltic countries, namely Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, are particularly vulnerable to a possible conflict with the Russian Federation. Occupied for decades by the Soviet Union, these now westernized countries are just now building a Baltic defense line, a border hundreds of miles long, studded with anti-tank ditches and pillboxes. Lithuania has already purchased stockpiles of dragon's teeth, concrete pyramids designed to stop tanks, and plans to mine its bridges to the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, NBC News reported, citing a statement from the Lithuanian Defense Ministry. At the same time, the author of the book, Who Will Defend Europe? Awakened Russia and the Sleeping Continent, Keir Giles, believes that the problem is that countries further away still pretend that the war is something that happens to other people. Moreover, the efforts are further complicated by the political situation. Leading European parties are being challenged by populists who often mix their strong opposition to immigration with a softer and sometimes even friendly stance towards Russia. The publication notes, therefore, now the real problem is seen only by those who believe that Russia's war against Europe has already begun. Those who don't worry just don't care, Giles said. Mykola Malomuz, general of the Ukrainian army and former head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, believes Ukraine can turn the tide of the war, halt Russia's offensive, and even launch counterattacks if the Ukrainian army adopts a new strategic and tactical approach. He shared his opinion with Espresso TV. I believe Ukraine has the potential to stop the creeping offensive of the occupying Russian forces and launch counterattacks on specific sections of the front. The key lies in the Ukrainian armed forces adopting a different strategy and tactical model. Sure, we have fewer resources, but by adjusting our strategy and tactics, we can change the dynamics of the war. Preparing for strategic strikes is also critical, and for that, we need to build up reserves. It's also important to keep receiving the latest weapons from our partners. Fortunately, US military aid hasn't been cut off. I'd add that the US military-industrial complex has a vested interest in this support continuing. Let's not overlook other partners who are also providing vital assistance. With the right steps and preparations, we can stop the Russians and carry out successful strategic operations on the front line, Malomuz explained. The general emphasized that international support and military aid are essential for Ukraine's success on the battlefield. Much depends on decisions from the Donald Trump administration, especially when it comes to increasing pressure on Russia. This could involve ramping up military aid to Ukraine or strengthening economic and energy sanctions, both of which would be powerful levers against Putin, he added. Recall Russian forces continued attacks on the so-called Ukrainian bridgehead in Kursk Oblast, but failed to advance. While some Russian military bloggers claimed attacks in the Nikolsky and Viktorivka areas, as well as Kurilivka, Ukrainian forces reportedly counterattacked near Sudza. According to Ukraine's Border Guard Service, Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled an assault by Russian mechanized units on the Sumy-Kursk border. Meanwhile, Russia's cross-border shelling of Sumy Oblast has intensified since January the 1st, and attempted incursions near Vovchansk in Kharkiv Oblast on January the 19th to the 20th were unsuccessful. Attacks near Borova also failed, although the Russian Defense Ministry claimed to have captured Novaya-Horivka southeast of the settlement. On the Lyman front, Russian troops attempted to advance near Zelena Dolina, Novosadov, Krynytsia, Terny, Zarychny, and Serebryansky Forest, but failed to achieve any major breakthroughs. Heavy fighting continues near Chasiv Yar, including battles inside the city, as well as Stupochki and Bila Hora. However, Russian troops failed to make progress. Near Toretsk, Russian forces launched fresh assaults, but Ukrainian officers on the ground reported that the enemy failed to achieve meaningful gains despite claims from Russian sources. Instead, Russian forces rely on small sabotage and reconnaissance groups to attack Ukrainian positions on the flanks. West of Pokrovsk, Ukrainian forces carried out counterattacks near Udachny, Kotlin, Uspenivka, Novovasilivka, Zviren, Yelizavetivka, and Vodian-Dru. Ukrainian military sources report a reduction in Russian frontal assaults due to manpower shortages, forcing Russian commanders to attempt flanking maneuvers.